Hey everyone, delighted to be here today. Thank you, Rajiv, for putting together TrustX Online, which is a series of talks from security practitioners in the Web3 space, sharing knowledge, content to the wider community. I'm here today to talk to you about practical security measures for Web3 founders. My name is Mehdi. I'm a co-founder and director of Sigma Prime. We'll cover a fair bit of topics today. I'll introduce myself, I'll introduce Sigma Prime very briefly, give you guys an overview of the stuff that keeps us busy. And then we're all, I think, very, very tired of hearing about all these breaches happening in our lovely ecosystem. The news lately has been quite prolific in terms of breaches and hacks. And there's a common denominator that I'll get to at some point. But the idea behind this talk is to provide you all with tools to implement in your day-to-day lives so that you can hopefully make an attacker trying to compromise your confidentiality or integrity make their job very, very difficult. So we'll go over some personal security items. We'll touch on infrastructure security as well, and then software security. We'll also touch base on what it means to be ready for a security review, also known as a security audit. And then at the end of this presentation, I want to mention an initiative that's very, very close to my heart, which is called the Security Alliance, or SEAL. We'll get to it at the end. All right, let's kick things off. Sigma Prime, I'm sure some of you, perhaps most of you, have heard of us. We've been around for 8 years. We're actually turning 8 in a couple of weeks, which feels like an eternity, especially in this industry. We're a blockchain security and research firm. We provide security assessment services to blockchain projects exclusively. So we do a lot of security assessments for smart contracts, EVM and non-EVM, so Solidity, but also a whole bunch of different languages. But I guess one of the key differentiator between Sigma Prime and other security firms in this space is our ability to go deeper and deeper in the stack. We work very closely with a bunch of blockchain foundations, L1s, L2s, and bridges to essentially help them ship more robust blockchain software. We love fuzz testing or fuzzing. So we've been creating and maintaining a whole bunch of fuzzing frameworks for some of those blockchain foundations. And yeah, the team is relatively small. We're about 40 people split across security and research and development. So the R&D side of the company, I guess, culminates with a project called Lighthouse. Lighthouse is an Ethereum consensus client written in Rust. It's free, it's open source. It's heavily optimized for performance, blazingly fast, but it's also obviously focused on security considering the company behind it. I checked a couple hours ago, and Lighthouse is responsible for 33.5% of the blocks produced on Ethereum mainnet today. It's a big honor, a big responsibility, a big privilege to be providing this piece of software for the global community. Yeah, that's Sigma Prime, CP in a nutshell. We are headquartered here in Sydney. That's where the company was born, but we have been expanding globally and have hired people all across the globe over the past few years. Surely some of these logos ring a bell. This is a list of clients who have trusted us with their security assessment requirements over the years. Grateful for their business, and obviously look forward to working with more of the most prominent Web3 protocols out there. Some metrics when it comes to InfoSec. We've performed over 200 security reviews over these past 8 years. As I said, the team is relatively small, about 15 of us on the security side, and we've reported a total of over 2,000 vulnerabilities to our clients. Cool. All right. That's CKP in a nutshell. Let's get in the meat of the topic. We're going to talk about personal security. And I just want people to realize that everyone listening to this video, watching this video, is potentially a target. We have seen over the past 2 years, 2.5 years, a massive uptick in activities coming from North Korea, illegal activities, that is, illegal online activities. CoinDesk shared an article about this pattern, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, but this is not really a secret for anyone in the industry, particularly those hiring. there is a massive push to compromise the integrity of Web3 organizations. And we'll take a look at what it means to hopefully protect against that. Just as a fun side note, we're hiring at Sigma Prime, so we're in the process of lining up and conducting interviews. About a week ago, one of my teammates and I interviewed this person who sounded really good on paper. Their CV looked really impressive, but something was really off in the interview. We were under the impression that we were chatting with a bot, even though the camera was on, and done a bit of due diligence. And we're now pretty convinced that we were talking to a North Korean agent. So yeah, this isn't fiction. This actually happens. Money has actually been stolen, and look at some of the numbers in a sec. But yeah, don't mean to scare you all, but it is very important to strengthen our defenses in this context. All right, this screenshot was taken from DeFi Llama a couple of days ago, and we are now up to almost $9 billion of value lost in the Web3 space, which is pretty crazy. The vast majority comes from DeFi protocols, but bridges as well have their fair share of incidents. And what's interesting to me is that while as an industry we're getting pretty good and have been focusing on smart contract security for a while now, obviously perhaps because of the DAO incident back in 2018, 2017. Attacks these days, they basically rely on a whole bunch of different attack vectors. On-chain exploitation is no longer really the default path to compromise a protocol. In fact, we are noticing a massive increase in private key leaks and compromises and attack scenarios that don't really have to do with anything on chain, as in like the core vulnerability that being exploited isn't related to smart contracts. Instead, it is related to what I usually refer to as the off-chain side. And we'll dive into some of those specifics. This happened a few days ago. Radiant Capital, which is a lending protocol on chain, lost $50 million. The multi-sig, which was a 3 of 11, not great, was compromised, and the post-mortem or some of the results of initial investigations performed by security experts in the field seem to indicate that workstations have been compromised. So yeah, again, $50 million lost, but in this case, Radiant Capital's contracts weren't at fault. Something I thought was quite funny. I think Ancilia is a security firm operating in the Web3 space as well. They've reacted really quickly to the incident and in fact linked a tweet from Radiant Capital, but actually the tweet wasn't from Radiant Capital. What these people have done is essentially link a draining URL. So this is a phishing attempt, which unfortunately seemed to have worked quite well and managed to trick security experts in the field. So this can happen to very much anyone. Don't think that because you're technical, this doesn't apply to you. Because you've heard of security, this does not apply to you. Or worse, perhaps you think that running an antivirus on your Windows workstation will protect you against this. Well, think again. Another quote unquote off-chain incident, which happened earlier this year, was related to the compromise of I think the largest cryptocurrency exchange in India, or one of the largest, with attackers being able to get away with $230 million worth of crypto assets. Pretty crazy. Again, this has nothing to do with any on-chain component or smart contracts. And multi-sig was, again, also compromised. It's a 4 out of 6. This one involved a custodian, which I thought was quite interesting because some of those exchanges do rely on external entities for custody, so to sort of protect themselves from these scenarios. But effectively, the attackers were able to gather 3 signatures out of the 4 required and managed to trick the custodial, which I think is liminal, into signing an upgrade that effectively updated the smart contract, the multi-sig smart contract, rendering it basically useless and transferring all the funds to the threat actor. So Yeah, not great. A few days ago, I think 24, 48 hours ago, Pascal, who's a prolific member of the Security Alliance working on SEAL 911, which I'll mention a bit later in this presentation, has put together this tool, just written in Bash. It's very simple, but I think extremely important, which allows you to compare what you're signing. The problem we have with hardware wallets these days is that it's actually very difficult to vouch for the payload you're signing. In the example I was given, it seemed that there was actually a discrepancy between what was being signed and what was displayed on the UI. So definitely advanced threats in this case, I'd say. Preparation, time, money, expertise all went into this attack. And again, $230 million. I think they're trying to recover some of it. But yeah, this tool will probably be more publicized and broadcasted in the next few days, weeks. But I think it's really important that we start taking signing, the act of signing a transaction extremely seriously. Cool. What can we do to mitigate these attacks from happening? We're all, I think, very tired of hearing about these hacks. And there are definitely a few things that we can do together collectively to raise the bar and make it harder and harder and harder for those threat actors to take our crypto. One of the things which is, I think, essential, and I can't stress this enough, people must stop using their phone as two-factor authentication. You'll probably hear me repeat this sentence quite often in the next few minutes, but it is essential. Do not use SMS-based 2FA. Use Google Authenticator instead. Better if you can. A hardware key, maybe a YubiKey. The reason behind this is SIM swapping attacks are very much common particularly in North America, I'd say. We are somewhat lucky here in Australia because they're actually very hard to pull off. We've had definitely recent incidents, but nothing like we've seen with our American and some of our European friends. The advice I was given by telecommunication security experts was to really avoid T-Mobile if you're in North America, because apparently the process of SIM swapping for that provider is unfortunately quite trivial. Instead, Google Fi, FNE, Tello seem to be very good options. And with some of those carrier, you can actually place a note on your carrier account or a lock. So you basically tell them that, hey, if anyone asks for a new SIM, make sure that it is me by asking these questions. It's not bulletproof, obviously. We've seen actually incidents of folks being able to bypass that lock or that note. But again, this is all about making it harder and harder and harder. If anyone, sells you anything, promising you that this will solve your security problems and will make you secure, run away. This is utter bullshit, pardon my French. The only thing we can really do is making it more and more difficult for attackers to get in. Cool. So cellular security is very important. Stop using SMS-based 2FA, please. X is also an interesting vector for black hats because of course, some of those protocols have very large followings, right? And triggering or tricking their followers or an account's followers into potentially sharing malicious links can have disastrous consequences. Again, you can think that, oh, I use a very complex password and unique password on Twitter or on X, so I should be fine. I think again, recently the SEC Twitter account got popped. And Vitalik is notoriously known for his really good security hygiene. So this literally anyone. So please make sure you use a unique and complex password. There's password breaches happening all the time, right? If you reuse your password across different services, if one of those services gets popped, chances are attackers can reuse that password across all the other services you use. So make sure you're using a unique and complex password. This isn't an X specific recommendation. This is really something that should apply to your online life on a daily basis. A lot of us have created their Twitter accounts years and years ago. And some of us may have changed email addresses in between. So that's happened to a mate of mine. He didn't realize that, yeah, he wasn't using an up-to-date email. That email got relinquished. An attacker managed to snap that email, and then obviously chaos ensued, and their X account was compromised. So make sure you're using an up-to-date email. Always a good idea to review active sessions, and if you don't recognize any devices in that list, just make sure you log out of those. You can trigger that from the XUI. And I think very importantly, make sure you remove your phone number, right? It shouldn't, I don't think it brings any advantage to have your phone number listed on X. So yeah, it just adds to the potential attack surface for malicious actors. 2FA, super important, but not SMS based, right? YubiKeys, Google Authenticator, whatever you want to use, just don't use your mobile number for this. Some folks may have granted third-party apps certain privileges or permissions so that they can either tweet on their behalf or, I don't know, scroll Twitter for the best possible cat memes. Review those accesses, because a lot of the breaches that happened, maybe not so much recently, this is probably a bit older, 2 to 3 years ago, were related to these third-party apps. So I, for one, don't use any. I don't really see the need for a Web3 business to rely on any. So my recommendation would be to just revoke access to any third-party app. Same with delegated accounts. Just review that list. If you're using delegated accounts within an X organization profile, that might make sense, but make sure you review those and delete or revoke accesses if unnecessary. And one that's, I think, a little unknown, but somewhat important, I'd say, is the password reset protection. This next slide compares the two options when you have it enabled and when you don't. Left is when you don't have it enabled, sorry. Right is when password reset protection is enabled. The difference between the two is that if you enable it, you actually have to provide your email address first before you can request a password reset, which makes sense. If you don't, which is the default behavior, the email address is suggested, and it's suggested in a fairly descriptive way, right? So again, this is personal identifiable information that's being potentially leaked and would help a threat actor in gathering information to further attack you. All right, cool. This is important. So please do the needful. Telegram. We all use Telegram. This is the best messaging app in the market. Joking. I think we all hate Telegram, but we feel like we're stuck with it. If you are a Web3 founder, kind of like trying to raise money, a lot of those conversations unfortunately happen over Telegram. If you're a security practitioner like myself, a lot of our clients prefer to speak over Telegram and use Telegram group chats. So my point is we're stuck with it. So might as well try to raise the bar when it comes to security. Telegram has come through a lot of scrutiny lately for its policy or lack of policy over content moderation, with its founder being arrested in France very recently. So what can we do to make our Telegram comms a bit less shitty? Well, 2FA, right? 2FA is not the answer to all the problems, but it is an important step that you can take today to enhance your protection. So again, by now, it should hopefully be described in your head. Do not use SMS-based 2FA, right? Make sure you use anything else, but do not rely on your mobile phone number for multi-factor authentication. And in fact, hide your phone number completely, right? I'll be publishing these slides so that you can go over them and action, hopefully, all these recommendations. Peer-to-peer calling as well, probably a good idea to just kill that. Deleting inactive sessions, turning on auto delete messages. Now, I can't give you the guarantee that those messages are effectively deleted on Telegram servers. I don't think anyone can, but one can only hope. But you can delete it from your clients at least. Discord, we've seen a few Discord server compromises lately, haven't we? And that's always really, really hard to digest as a security professional, because those threat actors aren't going for protocols that have, like a bunch of liquidity and treasury and kind of sealing their treasury, but what they're targeting is their user base. So people who effectively end up losing money with these social media takeovers are, end users, right? So yeah, that really sucks. So there's stuff we can do though. So again, 2FA, not SMS based. There's a lot of content out there explaining how to get roles and permissions right in Discord. I would strongly recommend spending some time to understand role permissions and role hierarchy. And as with sort of any online system, try to apply the principle of least privilege. Never grant more privileges, more permissions than strictly necessary. RAID protection can be enabled, which is always a good idea. And moderation obviously is really key, right? Because Discord server can be open, be raided by bots, and bots will again trying to lure your users into sending them crypto. So you can use as moderation bots. Carl, Dino, Wick are all good options, and you can use them in conjunction with verification levels. All right. Most of us in the Web3 space, I think, rely on Google, Gmail, Google Apps, Google Sheets, Google Docs, etc. Yeah. So again, 2FA, non-negotiable. Please enable 2FA on all the accounts that are part of your Google organization. You can, if you're a Google admin, if you're an admin of your Google workspace, sorry, then you can enforce that for all users, and they'll have, I think, you can actually set the time lenience that you give them, but it's usually you can give people a week to set that up. I've learned this not too long ago. By default, there's like information that's shared about you. Your profile picture is accessible to anyone, your gender as well, your birthday. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of don't want my birthday to just be out there. So you can hide that very easily. And I'll strongly encourage people to do that. Recovery methods. Now that's a tricky one, but they have been abused in the past, right? So make sure you at least review the recovery methods that you have, and maybe just remove some of them. That could be important. We've had a fair bit of drama last week with some large famous Web3 protocol getting a lot of tokens stolen, I guess, and that happened through the compromise of an email thread. That's all we know. And it's a bit tricky because how I can't get into the details because I don't know them. But what I can tell you is how to harden your emails, right? If you're using Google Mail, that is. So you can harden your email policy, and you can disable things like read receipts, mail delegation, email profiles, and automatic forwarding. SPF and DKIM allow you to actually authenticate email provenance. And that's very important. Same with anything really. If you have Google services that you don't use, just disable them. Review your sessions, your live sessions, and delete any unrecognized devices. And now, depending on who you are, it might be interesting to look into the advanced protection program. This is usually reserved for celebrities or people who are actively being targeted. But considering the extent of the threat we're facing, I do believe that most Web3 founders and their leadership teams should perhaps consider this program. So look into it, see if it makes sense to you. Perhaps it is constraining, but it might be best for your users and your protocol. All right. This is personal security. As if you had one thing I think to keep from this is stop using SMS-based two-factor authentication, please. Use unique passwords. And make sure that you understand the extent of your attack surface, right? Again, don't think that you're a Web3 protocol. Again, say you're a lending pool, you just deploy your smart contracts on chain, and you think that because you've received 5 security audits and you've got a bug bounty program and you've done a C4 contest that it makes you unhackable. This is not true. All right. Let's dive into infrastructure security. This slide summarizes what I've been saying for a bit of time now. Smart contract security is only a subset of Web3 security. Don't think that because your smart contracts are, I hate using the word secure, but have received a lot of scrutiny, it means that your entire operation is safe. That is not how it works. One of the things that we help with, I guess, a fair bit with Seal and also with Seal Prime is distributed denial of service. And a lot of protocols, unfortunately, face this issue. There's things that you can do to prevent that from happening. One of them is using CDNs, content delivery networks. So think of like Cloudflare. This is heaps better at distributing content and kind of comes embedded with a whole bunch of protections against denial of service conditions. You can go serverless as well. So if your app is, if the business logic of your app is all on chain and there's literally nothing outside of smart contracts and obviously a web app to invoke those smart contracts, then going serverless might make sense. You can look into Netlify, Vercel. But if you do end up deploying hosts on AWS, Azure, GCP, Hetzer or whatnot, all of the major cloud providers these days have some DDoS protection that you can easily activate and hopefully help you prevent those attacks. Again, if you are deploying infrastructure, if you're deploying hosts, then you have to harden the shit out of those hosts, right? It's your responsibility. Don't think, I heard this the other day from someone who didn't know what they were doing, but they said that they've deployed this EC2 instance on AWS and they could sleep well at night because it was on AWS, right? And like Amazon is notoriously famous for things like patch management and stuff like that. I laughed really hard and I instructed that person to go and effectively patch their box. You want to be applying operating system patches. You want to be applying middleware patches. You need to come up with the best way for you to do that. And that, I think, heavily depends on the operating system that you're relying on. But it's important to be up to date with all these patches. Block any port that is not meant to be accessed from the public, right? It just increases your attack surface, allows external threat actors to come in and knock on those ports and like scan them and potentially find vulnerabilities that would allow them to establish persistence on your box. So block those ports, block the R shell port, remote shell. You want to have some sort of IP whitelisting. So if this box is only meant to be accessed by a couple of people, then maybe just whitelist their IP addresses, right? Some of them might be working from home and their home address might change source IPs every now and then, but I think it just adds to the complexity of the requirement. It doesn't really void it. Yeah, remote root access. Hopefully it should go without saying, but no one should really have remote root access unless strictly necessary. And avoid account logging being shared. I think that's something that unfortunately a lot of our clients and partners still do. They have one account with one SSH key and they just share that account amongst a few different teams sometimes. And yeah, it's not great, obviously, because if one of those workstations that holds the SSH key gets popped, well, you know the drill. All right, cool. So that was infrastructure security. I want to talk about software security now. And software security goes beyond smart contract security once again, right? Like you got software in a whole bunch of different places in your stack. Like your web application is code, right? So I think it's very important to stick with well-tested frameworks, web application frameworks. So like React, Vue, Express, whatever rocks your boat. I'm not a JavaScript fan, but stick with those and usually try to rely on battle-tested versions that have been used in production by prominent Web2 actors. So web applications are definitely something we should be aware of in terms of attack vector. And then you got off-chain software, obviously, like all these sequencers on L2s, all these relayers, all these keepers on bridges, they, run with software, usually, TypeScript, Go, Rust. That should probably also be assessed, right? Again, does not have to be a smart contract for it to require external set of eyes. So yeah, cloud infrastructure, I think we spoke briefly about this earlier. I think it's important to understand that you may have things lingering around, like APIs that you've deployed and you've forgotten about. So just making sure you're aware of your attack surface again. We've spoken about social media and community management. Super important. Social engineering, unfortunately, happens all the time. Spear phishing is really common these days in the Web3 space. So having security awareness programs where you train your staff in identifying these threats is, I think, extremely important. Key management, whole kettle of fish, but you must have clear documented procedures that tells anyone really coming in, being onboarded, how you deal with key management. And you should particularly factor in how to rotate keys or how to deal with an employee that's no longer part of the team who had access to those keys, right? You should have a plan. It's not something they should come up with when that employee resigns. It should be something that you've designed from day one. All right, cool. So we're talking about software security, and a lot of software that we use in our lovely industry is hosted on GitHub, right? You get the odd project that uses GitLab, but I say safe to assume 98% of Web3 projects out there use GitHub. And it's super important to harden your GitHub organization settings. You want to enforce multi-factor authentication for all members. Again, not SMS based. Protected branches are extremely important. They allow you to make sure that no one can force push to your default branch without triggering, proper code reviews. Something that I'd like to see more often is code signing. It's the little green tick that you can see sometime next to your commits on GitHub. So that basically shows that you have signed that commit with either a GPG key or an SSH key that's associated with that GitHub user. So I think I'd like to see more of that. Pull request reviews. I thought this wasn't worth mentioning, but I've seen projects actually just push to main, push to master without actually raising pull requests and requesting reviews. So that's a bad idea, obviously, for obvious reasons. But yeah, you should never be pushing to main directly. You should be raising a pull request and asking a senior member of your team to provide a review and merge that if they're happy with whatever you've raised. Another thing that has also been unfortunately quite prevalent was the committing of secrets. So unfortunately, these things happen, but developers can add secrets to their commits inadvertently. So there's a easy way to prevent that from happening is through secret scanning. So GitHub has this nice feature that you can turn on, which basically will scan every single commit for potential secrets, and will basically accept the push if they're there. And the last thing I have for GitHub is padding obfuscation. And I've got some slides to illustrate this. And it is a fun one, and it is based on an exercise that we've done as part of the Security Alliance for our friends at Aave. Now, if you look at this screenshot, you probably recognize the ERC20 implementation, like standard ERC20 contract. Nothing really suspicious, right? But if you zoom into this function, the balance of function, and specifically here, right after the function declaration, you probably see that there's like an extra white line, which is, a bit sus. But what should probably give it away a bit more is these curly brackets. You know how we got one open here and two closed here? So what we've done in this particular example is hide a payload all the way to the right side of the screen. So in fact, this isn't a white line. This isn't a blank line, sorry. It's full of spaces and tabs so that we're forcing the GitHub UI to display this instruction all the way to the right, which means that if you're actually raising a pull request and requesting someone to review it, they won't see this. I've done this test multiple times. Rarely anyone sees this because you would have to scroll to realize that there's a scroll bar at the bottom of your GitHub screen, inviting you to scroll horizontally all the way to the right for you to actually see this. And what this instruction does, it recognizes an attacker's address, and for any balance of call for that address, it returns an absurd amount of token balances, allowing basically this attacker to spoof balances on that particular ERC20, effectively allowing them to transfer and drain the protocol. Cool. So that's a tricky one, but yeah, there's not much really that we can do apart, being some sort of aware of this attack vector. All right, dependency confusion is also an interesting one, particularly for people dealing with JavaScript. You may be using dependencies that are private, like internal to your organization, and you're declaring them as such in npm and whatnot. Now, I can't tell if this has been fixed in npm. You'll have to forgive me and perhaps look it up yourselves, but you used to be able to publicly register a dependency which had been potentially used internally by other folks, so that the next time they'll build their product using that internal dependency, well, the resolution will effectively point them to yours, the public one. And that resulted in some pretty nasty takeovers a couple of years ago. Perhaps NPM has fixed this, but I don't think. I think this is an attack vector that actually works on other package managers. So just being aware of this. And in some cases, it can be worthwhile to register the dependency, even if it's used internally. You won't have to release it and publish it, but it would prevent someone from doing that, basically. Workflows, they're super handy. Like CI is awesome, right? We use GitHub CI for Lighthouse, and we use it extensively. It's got a lot of very cool features, including self-hosted runners. But you want to make sure that you restrict who can effectively trigger those CI workflows, because otherwise anyone can sort of come in, raise a pull request, and trigger computation. And that computation can be costly. And there's also other things that you can actually pull from a GitHub Action CI session. So we don't want random people to be able to trigger that, right? And you want to look at what changes in your Git hooks. Anytime we're dealing with submodules, super important. And I'd like people to be a bit more paranoid about this, right? Because if you update a submodule, the GitHub UI, like it has that folder with an arrow. So it basically kind of looks like a symbolic link. That particular submodule links to a particular repo. But what we fail to sometimes notice is that the submodule itself that's included in your own repo does not have the origin. Like the folder name is the name of the repo. It doesn't say which organization has control over the repo. So say you're including Solidity utils, right? The library in your smart contract repository. Someone could definitely create a malicious Solidity utils, naming it the same, right? And then point the submodule in the target repo to the new one. And it'll be actually fairly difficult for people to spot that unless they're reviewing that particular submodule change thoroughly. So be cautious of those submodule changes. There's a nice hardening guide for GitHub Actions that I would recommend going through, security hardening for GitHub Actions, which outlines a whole bunch of steps that you can take to strengthen your CI. All right, cool. Awesome. I'm going to take some time now to talk about what it means to get a security review and how you can be best prepared. I don't call them audits. The whole world calls them audits. I call them security assessments or security reviews. And one of the key things I believe is to document everything. Docs. The more the merrier, at least speaking for Sigma Prime. The more verbose you are, the happier we get. Don't worry about overflowing us with content. We're pretty good at navigating large amounts of information. So please open the floodgates and really try to document as much as you can. What should be included in your docs, you might say? Well, good system overview, I think, is very important, just to kind of clarify what your protocol does or what's the intention behind what you're launching. User flow diagrams are also pretty good. Now, they don't necessarily need to be diagrams. They can just be like narratives explaining how Alice, Bob, Carol could interact with your protocol. And then if you've made any design choices that you suspect could have implications when it comes to security, it's always a good idea to document. Say, for some reason, you're stuck Solidity compiler 0.7. Now, I don't know why you would be, but say that is a constraint of yours. Explicitly documenting that is extremely important. Same with restrictions, limitations. Perhaps your protocol does not allow smart contracts to be interacted with. Weird, but I've seen that before. So anytime you have something restricting or limiting functionality, always make a note so you can share that with third parties. Most people, I hope, use dependencies, right? You're not gonna rewrite again like the bytelib or the solidity utils. So you're gonna just like port that, use that as a submodule, potentially. Being very cautious of our dependencies is very important. We need to be able to have a list of those depths readily available, and we need to be able to review that list and make sure that we are tracking updates to that list and we are porting them to our code base, right? Otherwise, if one of those dependencies is affected by a critical vulnerability, we may not know about it, right? This critical vulnerability may be carried all the way to our protocol and could potentially put user funds at risk. So making sure that we understand the extent of our depths, monitor them for updates, and applying those updates is really important. In most protocols, there's different levels of permissions. You may have an owner, you may have an operator, you may have a user, you may have a liquidator, etc. Ensuring you have a clear view of those roles is, again, super important. And documenting what each role has access to goes a long way. And I guess something that I like to see is a formal spec or an executable spec. I guess the Ethereum Foundation somewhat pioneered this with the Ethereum consensus spec, which is effectively a Python spec. It's executable, and yeah, it's great. I don't expect most projects to be able to come up with this, but if you can, that would be a solid addition. All right, comment your code, people. I like this meme because yeah, just comment your code. Don't overthink it. Just not specs, comments every time you're dealing with heavy arithmetic or introducing a new concept in your implementation. Just comment it out. And while at Sigma Prime, we write our own tests when it comes to smart contract testing, because we don't really trust our clients' tests. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't test your own code base, right? In fact, you should definitely be spending a lot of time, effort, and money internally to test your protocol. And there's a few different ways to test your protocol. One of them being positive unit tests. So the actual paths that are handled by your code. So like a withdrawal, deposit, things like that. It's testing them, making sure they function. You'd be surprised. I had a client about 1.5 years ago, their withdrawal function wouldn't work. Right? It was like, you just deposit, I think it was stable coins, I think it was USDC or USDT, and then you were expected to be able to withdraw. The next block, can't withdraw. So something that could have been caught very easily by the developers had they written unit tests. Negative unit tests as well, they're pretty important, making sure that I can't withdraw funds if I haven't deposited, things like that. And then integration tests, I think we're starting to see a lot more of these, and it's great. We have test nets that we can deploy on, but it's super important to have a comprehensive end-to-end test, particularly if you're dealing with multiple chains, if you're a bridge. The testing infrastructure can get quite messy, I'll give you that, but it's super important. And then what we call active tests, so like post-deployment testing. So you effectively simulate, pretty much, we can do this on-chain, on test nets, a particular deployment. If you have formal verification and fuzz testing, you're doing well. Hard Hat, Brownie, Foundry have all been very popular frameworks used by testing teams. We prefer Foundry internally these days, though we have a lot of experience building test suites with Brownie. But Foundry is extremely fast, and we love Rust at Sigma Prime. So yeah, kind of been defaulting to Forge these last few months. And another question that I get often is, when should I be getting a review? Some people think, well, I'm deploying to mainnet on Monday. I'll just reach out to the auditors on Friday and that should work. Not really. So first of all, you should be seeking a security assessment, an external security assessment, whenever you're ready for feedback, really. It doesn't mean that you have to wait until everything is done. You've finalized the development of all your features, you've tested them, and you're about to deploy. That's, I'd say, the traditional way of looking at security reviews. But there's absolutely value in getting security practitioners to assist and help and look over your code base, as I said, whenever you're ready for feedback. And ideally, you want to get any changes, any updates reviewed, even potentially those that don't look like they're impacting your business logic. Those are the sneaky ones. Those are the tricky ones, because you may not actually be thinking of all the ways a change could impact your code base. So maybe get that reviewed by someone else as well. We love our clients to basically run as many tools as they can before engaging us. That helps us focus on the, I guess, most important part of a review, which is the manual review. And this is where the juicy business logic type flaws are typically identified by CDP. So, all the slithers, the mithrils, all the like Go vets, and all the tools that you can think of, all the static analyzers, just run them. That, it doesn't take long, it takes a few minutes, and make sure you go over the report and clear any low-hanging fruits that you could potentially spot. And then, plan accordingly. A lot of us are very busy. My team is relatively small, so we're typically booked out for a long time. So like 3, 4, 5 months sometimes in advance. So make sure you start having those conversations with blockchain security firms early. All right, cool. Last section of this presentation is related to the Security Alliance. I will go over a few slides relatively quickly. But I invite everyone to take a look at the Security Alliance website, so securityalliance.org, and there's a lot more interesting content there. So this stuff isn't easy, is it? So, I've been doing this for 8 years now, and I kind of want to say that it gets harder and harder. Attackers are coming up with more clever ways of breaching systems. And while we're raising the bar, the crypto primitives that we're using are getting more and more complex. So this stuff is not necessarily super straightforward, but the good news is we have formed a neutral alliance back in 2023, called the Security Alliance. It's also known as SEAL. We'll refer to it as SEAL for the rest of the presentation. It's a nonprofit, and I guess the slogan of the alliance is moonshots with consensus. So it was started by Sam CZ's son, who works with Paradigm. If you've been living in a cave over the past 5 years and don't know who Sam is, Sam has saved Ethereum's ass countless amounts of time. He's a true legend in the space. He has the recognition and respect of anyone who's really serious about this stuff. So he came up with this idea, and the premise behind this initiative is to effectively offer untainted information, right? So we don't want any marketing spilling over whatever we'll be producing. And we want to be able to represent the Web3 security industry in one authoritative voice. And that's super important when we start dealing with policymakers, regulators, and whatnot. If we are all trying to have those conversations and we're not, united and speaking behind a credible, neutral organization, then we're losing a lot of the potential influence that we may have. So we're proud, Sigma Prime is a proud founding member of the Security Alliance. And I just want to take a few seconds to thank all these VCs and blockchain foundations for their support. Vitalik as well gave a donation to the Security Alliance, which helped us bootstrap this effort. And there's a lot of cool stuff that has been going on with SEAL. So SEAL 911 is one of them. War Games, ISAC, Safe Hub Agreement, and the Legal Defense Fund. I don't have time to go over all of them, so I've selected a couple, and I'll dive into them. So SEAL 911, you can think of it as a hotline, 24/7 hotline. If anything was to happen to you, and fingers crossed, touch wood, after this talk and all the advice that was shared with you, if you still get in trouble, unfortunately, it's quite a lonely time, right? Like if you've lost money to scammers, if the funds you've deposited into this smart contract have just vanished, people don't really know what to do. Hey, I've noticed this, and this is, I think, the first step in helping users is having actual people who do care and who do have the security expertise to assist you. In fact, there's been already over $50 million saved or recovered by SEAL 911, and I think this number is outdated. And from what I've heard over the past week or so, another 10 to 20 million dollars have been saved. So it's effectively people like myself. I used to be part of SEAL 911. I'm no longer part of it, but a whole bunch of other Web3 security practitioners actually answering hotline calls, right? Like it's a Telegram bot, so you can reach out to it. It'll create a ticket, and it'll, sort of palm that off to the right people, the people who are available at the time, and they'll be able to help. So yeah, if anything was to happen, SEAL 911 is here. The White Hat Safe Harbor is also super important. It basically provides a legal framework and encourages responsible security practices. So it's basically a way that incentivizes hackers to do the right thing. And you can think of it as a smart contract registry that you, as a representative of a DAO, with a record that says, okay, this DAO basically declares this EVM account or Ethereum address as the safe harbor, meaning that if you are to perform any white hat rescue type activities, you can deposit those funds directly into that account. And by doing so, you're effectively agreeing to this white hat safe harbor. And as a, result, the DAO waives its potential rights to sue you, which is quite important. A lot of effort has gone into this. A lot of very, very clever lawyers have reviewed this proposal for months, if not well over a year now, and it's finally live. And we've seen a whole bunch of very critical Web3 protocols adopt it. So if you are part of a DAO, I highly encourage you to consider incorporating Safe Harbor into your protocol. And as part of Safe Harbor, there was this, adjacent initiative, which is the Legal Defense Fund. So say you kind of gone through all of this, but someone is threatening to sue you anyway, it can be quite discouraging. I've met security researchers, a few security researchers who have faced legal trouble. And it is, disconcerting to say the least. What SEAL has done is collaborate with the Security Research Legal Defense Fund. And basically, we gave them a grant for legal fees. And that grant could be, you can ask for a grant from the Legal Defense Fund to basically help pay for any legal fees that you might be facing. And this is a cool example. The Legal Defense Fund have actually been used. It's been used a few months ago, about 5 months ago now. This is a picture of 3 Polish hackers who essentially managed to reverse engineer software related to a train. That train wasn't working the way it was supposed to work. And I may have a few minutes to dive into this story a bit more because it's a fascinating story. So what happened was this town bought the trains from the manufacturer. The contract stated that maintenance was to be performed by the vendor, the train manufacturer, for a certain period of time. After that period of time, the town was allowed to go seek different third parties for maintenance, right? That was actually legally binding. So they've gone through, so they bought the trains, operated the trains, got them maintained by the vendor, by the manufacturer. And then a few weeks later, past these, I think, couple of years of enforcement of using the manufacturer, they've decided to go and use other third parties. They realized that the trains wouldn't start at those third party locations. And the third parties didn't really understand why. They were just kind of doing their maintenance job. It was like an electronic job. So it was really confusing. So the town decided to hire these 3 fellow hackers. And what they've uncovered was pretty wild. The manufacturer has incorporated in their software geofencing, meaning that if the train was in maintenance and in a location that wasn't one of the sites of the manufacturer. The train wouldn't start. Pretty wild. So that you're basically forcing every one of your clients to default back to using you for maintenance. Crazy story. So these folks uncovered the whole thing, lots of reverse engineering research. They've shared their findings in a security conference, a hacker conference, and then shortly after received threats from the manufacturer, legal threats. This is still ongoing, but these folks are now supported by the White Hat Legal Defense Fund, which is paying for the lawyers, really. So yeah, this stuff happens in our lovely world. So it's good to know that we now have some sort of capacity to fund legitimate defense. And then one of the last things I want to talk about is the war games that have been happening. You can think of them as like purple teaming. So red teaming is, I guess, what we do at Sigma Prime and what like the auditors do, like they're trying to come and break into protocols. Blue teams defend against attackers. And then purple teaming is basically the intersection of the two. And it's collaborative work. It's making sure that we each learn from each other to make the red team better and the blue team better as well. So we've done this. SEAL has done this for a wide variety of protocols over the past few months. So Compound was one of the first ones, then Aave, Uniswap, and OP with Coinbase. We were involved in a war game for Aave. So there was two phases: a live simulated incident. So it's basically, we deploy Aave on a fork network, and we manipulate the network to basically introduce an incident. In this case, you could, potentially hijack the Oracle updates and push bogus price feeds. And the second phase was governance CTF, which is where we played with that GitHub vulnerability, or that GitHub padding obfuscation technique that I mentioned earlier. And I guess the last thing I want to leave you with is a new initiative that hasn't been formally launched. It's live, but hasn't been formally announced. It'll be formally announced at DevCon. This initiative is called Frameworks, and it basically allows us to have one central place where we can store and share security best practices across the entire stack. Again, not just focused on smart contract security, but also addressing any area where mistakes can be costly. So it is unbiased, it's marketing free. We're not here to promote a vendor or a particular strategy, and it's community focused. So if you go to frameworks.securityalliance.org, you will land on this page. And that's something that we've been working on for quite some time, which, as I said, will be unveiled at DevCon. But we should have very soon a place where we can all go and refer to when it comes to getting security standards, best practices. And this is a community-driven effort. We will be needing collaborators and contributors. So if you are interested, please check out the GitHub repo. Again, frameworks.securityalliance.org. You'll have a link to the GitHub repository. There's a whole bunch of issues out there. And yeah, we look forward to having a bunch of you contribute, hopefully. That's it for me. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Rajiv, for organizing this series of presentations, TrustX Online. I hope to see some of you very soon, perhaps in Thailand for DSS or DevCon. You can hit me up on Twitter @EatzZ or on Telegram as well, if needed. Thank you all. Chat soon.